In the annals of ancient history, few conflicts resonate with the intensity and scale of the First Punic War. Spanning over 2 decades, from 264 BC to 241 BC, this monumental clash between the Roman Republic and the established maritime power of Carthage would shape the geopolitical landscape of the Western Mediterranean for centuries to come. Rome, a burgeoning republic, had recently consolidated its hold over the Italian peninsula and was eyeing further expansion. Its military prowess, particularly its legions, was becoming renowned. Conversely, Carthage was an established maritime empire with vast territories spanning parts of North Africa, Sardinia, Corsica, and parts of the Iberian Peninsula. Its naval dominance was unmatched, and its commercial networks were extensive. The two powers had coexisted relatively peacefully, with treaties delineating their spheres of influence. However, as Rome's ambitions grew, it began to cast its gaze upon Sicily, an island under Carthaginian influence but also home to Greek colonies like Syracuse. The island became a flashpoint when a dispute erupted between the two principal cities on the Sicilian east coast, Messana and Syracuse, drawing the attention of both Rome and Carthage. The Carthaginians, eager to strengthen their position in Sicily, were the first to respond, establishing a garrison in Messana. Rome, viewing the Carthaginian presence so close to the Italian mainland as a direct challenge, felt compelled to act. The Roman Senate, after much deliberation, decided to intervene, not so much out of sympathy for the Messenians but rather to counter Carthaginian influence. This decision to intervene in Sicily led to a confrontation between Roman and Carthaginian forces at Messana. The ensuing skirmishes and the expulsion of the Carthaginian garrison from Messana by the Romans effectively served as the declaration of war, marking the beginning of the First Punic War. The Carthaginians, understandably, were not pleased with this Roman incursion into what they considered their sphere of influence. Carthage saw Rome's actions as a direct affront and a violation of the previously understood boundaries between the two powers. In response, Carthage prepared for war. They bolstered their military presence in other parts of Sicily and sought alliances with other Sicilian cities to counter the Roman threat. The situation quickly escalated. Both powers, recognizing the strategic importance of Sicily not just as a source of grain, but also as a key naval base in the central Mediterranean, were unwilling to back down. Skirmishes between the two sides became more frequent, and what began as a localized conflict over Messana soon spiraled into a full-blown war that would rage on for over 2 decades. The city of Syracuse, under the leadership of King Hiero II, initially opposed the Roman presence in Messana. However, after a confrontation in which the Romans emerged victorious against Syracuse's forces, Hiero shifted his allegiance and allied with Rome. This was a significant diplomatic victory for the Romans, as Syracuse was the most powerful city-state on the island. Carthage, recognizing the growing Roman threat, began to fortify its positions in western Sicily and launched naval raids along the Italian coast, aiming to divert Roman attention and resources. The two powers were now firmly entrenched in their respective positions, and the island became a battleground. Initially rooted in territorial disputes in Sicily, the war evolved into a predominantly naval conflict, a shift driven by the strategic importance of maritime dominance in the Mediterranean. Both Rome and Carthage recognized that control of the sea lanes was crucial for the movement of troops and supplies, and for maintaining communication lines with their respective territories and allies. Carthage, with its centuries-long maritime tradition, initially held the advantage, boasting a formidable navy and experienced sailors. Rome, primarily a land power, understood that to challenge Carthage effectively and safeguard its coasts and supply lines, it needed to establish naval superiority. The vastness of the Mediterranean theater also meant that many confrontations occurred at sea, as both powers sought to intercept and block each other's movements. Additionally, the island of Sicily itself, being the primary theater of war, necessitated naval operations for sieges, blockades, and troop landings. As a result, the war's dynamics compelled both empires to invest heavily in their navies, leading to some of the largest naval battles of antiquity. The Romans suffered a significant naval setback in 260 BC at the Battle of Lipari Islands. This was one of the first naval engagements of the First Punic War. The Romans, under the command of the consul Cornelius Scipio, attempted a surprise attack on the Carthaginian fleet anchored at the Lipari Islands. However, the plan backfired. The Carthaginians, led by the general Hannibal Gisco, not to be confused with the more famous Hannibal Barca of the Second Punic War, were alerted to the Roman presence and managed to trap the Roman fleet. The Romans were caught off guard, and a significant portion of their fleet was captured. Gnaeus Cornelius Scipio was taken prisoner, earning him the unfortunate nickname Asina, which means donkey in Latin. Recognizing their naval shortcomings and the superiority of Carthaginian shipbuilding and tactics, the Romans sought a way to level the playing field. The solution was the corvus, which means raven in Latin and was essentially a boarding bridge with a large spike on its underside. This device could be dropped onto an enemy ship, allowing Roman soldiers to board and engage in hand-to-hand combat, an area where they excelled. The corvus effectively transformed naval engagements into land battles on the decks of ships. The introduction of the corvus proved pivotal at the Battle of Mylae in 260 BC, where the Romans achieved a decisive victory against the Carthaginians. But the most significant naval battle of the First Punic War was the Battle of Ecnomus, fought in 256 BC. It stands out not only for its scale but also for the tactical maneuvers employed by both sides. The Romans had realized the necessity of taking the war to the African mainland to strike at the heart of Carthage. To achieve this, they amassed a massive invasion force, aiming to land in Africa. The Carthaginians, aware of this intent, prepared to intercept and halt the Roman advance at sea. The scale of the battle was unprecedented. The Romans fielded a fleet of about 330 ships, carrying on board not just sailors but also a significant number of legionaries for the intended invasion. The Carthaginians, determined to thwart the Roman plans, mustered a slightly larger fleet, estimated at around 350 ships. In total, over 250,000 men were involved in the Battle of Ecnomus, making it possibly the largest naval engagement of antiquity. The battle ended in a decisive Roman victory. They managed to sink or capture around 30 Carthaginian ships at the cost of 24 of their own. This victory cleared the path for the Roman fleet to land in Africa, marking the beginning of the African phase of the First Punic War. Upon landing in Africa, the Romans quickly established a fortified base. They then began a series of campaigns, capturing several towns and defeating Carthaginian forces in minor engagements. The local populace, many of whom were under Carthaginian rule but not necessarily loyal to Carthage, provided valuable intelligence and, in some cases, even allied with the Romans. In 255 BC, the Romans laid siege to the town of Audes. The Carthaginians attempted to lift the siege, leading to the Battle of Audes, where the Romans emerged victorious. This victory further bolstered Roman confidence, and it seemed for a moment that Carthage might be forced into a peace treaty on Roman terms. However, the situation began to change with the arrival of Xanthippus, a Spartan mercenary hired by Carthage. He quickly retrained and reorganized the Carthaginian army, emphasizing the use of their superior cavalry and the formidable war elephants. With their forces rejuvenated under Xanthippus's guidance, the Carthaginians confronted the Romans near Tunis in 255 BC. The battle saw the Carthaginian cavalry and elephants wreak havoc on the Roman legions, leading to a catastrophic Roman defeat. The remnants of the Roman army were forced to retreat to their coastal base. Following the disaster at Tunis and facing logistical challenges, the Romans decided to evacuate most of their forces from Africa. A storm further decimated the returning fleet, adding to the Roman calamities. With the Roman threat to the African mainland repelled, both Rome and Carthage turned their attention back to Sicily. The Romans laid siege to several Carthaginian-held cities, most notably Panormus, which is modern-day Palermo, and Lilybaeum. Panormus fell to the Romans in 254 BC, marking a significant victory. However, Lilybaeum proved to be a tougher challenge, resisting Roman attempts at capture for years. The conclusion of the First Punic War came after over 2 decades of intense and costly conflict between Rome and Carthage. The war, which had seen battles rage from the shores of Sicily to the African mainland, finally reached its climax in a decisive naval engagement. Near the Agates Islands, off the western coast of Sicily, the Romans, with lighter and more maneuverable ships, managed to sink or capture a significant portion of the Carthaginian fleet, securing a decisive victory. The loss at the Agates Islands was a devastating blow to Carthage. With their fleet crippled and their forces on Sicily isolated, the Carthaginians were in a precarious position. Recognizing the dire situation, Carthage sued for peace. The peace terms were negotiated and formalized in the Treaty of Latacius. Under its terms, Carthage agreed to evacuate all of Sicily, effectively ceding control of the island to Rome. Additionally, Carthage was to pay a substantial indemnity to Rome over 10 years. The treaty also stipulated that Carthage would not attack any allies of Rome and would refrain from attacking Roman ships. The First Punic Wars marked the beginning of Rome's ascent as the dominant power in the Western Mediterranean. Sicily became Rome's first overseas province, setting a precedent for future Roman territorial expansions. Carthage, while weakened, remained a significant power, and tensions with Rome persisted. These unresolved animosities would eventually lead to further conflicts, notably the Second and Third Punic Wars. While Rome emerged as the victor, the war's length and intensity highlighted the formidable challenge posed by Carthage. The conflict laid the groundwork for the broader struggle for Mediterranean dominance, which would shape the region's history for centuries to come.